Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Stella Napanu. I am a conservation scientist and an indigenous leader from the Samburu community in northern Kenya, and a strong advocate for community-led climate solutions. So I'm one of the representatives from the forum, and this is a forum event, so I'd like to welcome you all to this event. And yeah, so one of the representatives of the forum from Africa, and the other being DL Mwenge, who comes from the DRC. Although I'm currently also transitioning from the forum to join the Integrity Council to head the work on the policy and partnerships for indigenous peoples and local communities to ensure that they are best represented in the market and these conversations. So my background is rooted in rangelands ecology, indigenous knowledge systems, and community governance. And my motivation for this work comes from working with communities and coming from communities that host projects and have potential of hosting projects. And I've lived in harmony with the environment. And these are communities that have these climate solutions for the longest. They've always had these climate solutions for their generations, in generations. Um, so these communities are, this knowledge is usually overlooked, and these communities are usually overlooked and under-resourced. And it is time to really bring out these conversations on their traditional ecological knowledge and their ways of governance to ensure that it is embedded in project designs globally. So it is important that we see both indigenous peoples and local communities not just as beneficiaries, but equal partners to carbon projects, because they play a really critical role in helping fight this climate crisis. So the proposal of an Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities Voluntary Carbon Markets Engagement Forum was announced in COP28, which has been a principal output of a 2-year initiative and of a series of global consultations, workshops, and discussions that were led by the Integrity Council. In January 2024, the Integrity Council initiated a nomination process for the forum. This call attracted 64 nominations from across the globe, reflecting the broad interest of indigenous peoples and local communities in trying to shape the voluntary carbon markets in the way that benefits them as well. So following this, 8 members were appointed to the forum, representing diverse regions to ensure that there is inclusivity, and 2 from Africa, myself included, though my position is currently vacant, and the call for nomination is open to fill this gap. 2 representatives from Asia, 2 representatives from Latin America, 1 representative from the Northern Hemisphere region, and 1 representative from Oceania. So this forum comprises of individuals who bring in a wealth of experience, and those that have really worked with communities before, and they're not representing their organizations that they're working for in this forum. They come in to bring their lived experience and to bring their mind to really shape these conversations. So the forum has 2 primary objectives, which is to ensure the rights and interests of both indigenous peoples as well as local communities are central in the high integrity carbon market. It also seeks to enable communities to self-strengthen so that they can choose whether they want to engage in the market, and not as beneficiaries again, but as equal partners. So really building that their self-strengthening skills, to make sure that they engage on equal footing with the market. So the forum goes further into this ambition by wanting to recognize traditional ecological knowledge and governance, and not just recognize, but also making sure that they're embedded in project designs so that the conversation can actually be led by the indigenous peoples. So the Integrity Council is currently incubating the forum, helping it seek funds, but it is a self-led forum, and it is making sure that indigenous peoples are empowered as innovators, as right holders, and as leaders in the market. So it aims also to ensure that carbon markets respect, protect, and promote the rights, interests, and self-determined priorities of these communities by making sure that they remove barriers, building capabilities, creating enabling environment for both indigenous peoples and local communities so that they can thrive in this market on their own terms. So of the indigenous peoples I know, there are mixed experiences with the market, and I believe we can all attest to that. And this underlines the importance of this forum to really make sure that there is a rely on the support of CSOs, NGOs, climate justice institutions, and policy stakeholders to make sure that this dream is actually realized. So this presents a unique opportunity to shape a high integrity carbon market in which the rights, priorities, and voices of the communities are meaningfully integrated in each stage of the carbon value chain. So with that foundation in place, I will not be speaking about what exactly the forum is doing. So I would like to invite Onel, who is the co-chair of the other co-chair of the forum and also a representative from the Latin America region, to come and tell us exactly what the forum is doing and explain how the forum wants to turn this collaborative mission into meaningful action. So thank you very much. Welcome, Onel.
Buenas tardes. Un saludo de parte de la copresidencia, de mi hermano Diel de Congo y mi persona.
So good afternoon. Welcome from the co-chairs, myself and DL from the Congo, who's not here today.
También queremos saludar a uno de los miembros del foro, Mamta, que nos está acompañando.
I'd also like to welcome Manta, who's one of the members of the forum here. Welcome.
Ok, entonces el foro, como lo ha dicho Estela, es una instancia autónoma, independiente de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales en relación al tema del mercado voluntario de carbono.
As Stella's previously mentioned, the forum is an autonomous, independent initiative for Indigenous peoples and local communities in relation to the voluntary carbon market.
En los últimos meses, porque todavía el foro no cumple el año, los representantes de las regiones de Asia, África, Oceanía, Norteamérica, Latinoamérica, nos hemos reunido para poder impulsar esta iniciativa.
So it's not yet been a whole year yet, it's just been 11 months, but the forum has met with representatives from Asia, Africa, Oceania, and Latin America, and the Caribbean as well.
El foro estamos trabajando en la estrategia y además lo principal es, queremos ir más allá de la consulta, sino ir a una acción coordinada y tener impacto.
Strategy, we've been looking at our core principles and we want to go beyond consultation. What we are trying to do is to have coordinated action and impact.
En ese sentido, hemos identificado 5 áreas prioritarias.
So we've identified 5 priority areas in our forum.
Uno es eliminar los obstáculos a la entrada del mercado de carbono.
So firstly, we want to remove barriers to market entry into the carbon market.
La idea es identificar y eliminar las barreras jurídicas, informativas y estructurales que impiden a los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales acceder al mercado voluntario de carbono.
So the idea of the forum is to aim to identify and eliminate legal, informational, and structural barriers that prevent Indigenous peoples as well as local communities from accessing the carbon market.
pero priorizando los derechos de los pueblos indígenas y que los pueblos indígenas tengan la libertad con su autonomía, autodeterminación, de entrar al mercado de carbono con una información veraz y efectiva.
But the idea is to recognize Indigenous peoples' rights, to give them the freedom, their autonomy and self-determination if they want to enter into the carbon market or not with an under informed decision.
La segunda área prioritaria es la autofortalecimiento,
Next
donde
slide, please.
queremos indicar fortalecer la capacidad de los pueblos indígenas.
So the
Yeah.
next priority areas to strengthen the capacities of Indigenous peoples entering the carbon market.
La idea es crear juntos un material de formación que sea culturalmente pertinente a los pueblos indígenas.
We want to create training materials that will be culturally relevant to Indigenous peoples.
Esto permitirá que los pueblos indígenas se autoidentifiquen cuáles son las necesidades que hay y cómo relacionar con los agentes externos y no estar dependiendo de los expertos fuera de las comunidades.
The idea is for Indigenous peoples to self-identify their needs, what they need in relation to entering the carbon market, and not to depend on external actors or experts outside of the communities.
La otra prioridad que hemos identificado es definir las mejores prácticas en los repartos de los beneficios.
And the next area is defining best practice in benefit sharing. That's the third priority area.
En este sentido, quiero enfatizar lo que dijo mi compañera Estela, en que si los pueblos indígenas entran al mercado voluntario de carbono, sea como socios, porque de esa manera garantiza que los beneficios sean justamente repartidos.
So I want to just repeat and stress what Stella said, that for Indigenous people to enter the voluntary carbon market, we want to enter as partners in order to be able to guarantee real benefit sharing.
De esa manera le vamos a dar legitimidad a la iniciativa del mercado del carbono porque los pueblos indígenas van a sentir que son parte, porque si hablamos solamente de beneficiarios, es como si estuviera esperando que alguien me dé un apoyo por algo que nuestro territorio posee, que son los bosques.
So this will give a legitimacy to the initiative of the voluntary carbon market, because as Indigenous peoples, we want to be part of it. We want to be partners. We don't want to just be beneficiaries, because we're the ones who have the territories. We have the forests in our territories, so we should really be sharing in the benefits, truly.
La prioridad número 4 es definir las mejores prácticas en mecanismos de reclamación.
So the fourth priority area is to define best practice and grievance mechanisms.
Esto es con la finalidad de garantizar la rendición de cuentas y generar confianza de la gobernanza del mercado de carbono.
So the idea of this is to guarantee accountability and to generate confidence in the carbon market.
La otra prioridad que tenemos es sobre los conocimientos ecológicos tradicionales y derechos consuetudinarios.
Sorry, next slide, please. So the next area is to acknowledge traditional ecological knowledge and customary laws.
Queremos poner en relieve la importancia de los sistemas de conocimientos indígenas y la estructura de gobernanza consuetudinarias en la gobernanza del clima y el carbono.
So the idea is to highlight the importance of Indigenous knowledge within our own governance, our own customary government systems within carbon governance as well.
El foro pretende integrar los conocimientos indígenas en el diseño de proyectos, metodologías y marcos de mercado más amplios.
So the idea of the forum is to integrate Indigenous knowledge within the design and the implementation of these broader market frameworks.
De los 5 prioridades, ya hemos avanzado con tres temáticas. Uno, en crear capacidad y permitir autofortalecimiento de las comunidades.
So within these 5 priorities, we've already defined 3 of our priorities.
y los recursos existentes para el desarrollo de capacidades en el mercado voluntario de carbono con el fin de identificar lagunas y oportunidades.
So we currently have a review of tools and existing resources for capacity development within the to identify gaps and opportunities that exist within this.
Otro de las iniciativas es el diálogo en línea para evaluar la concientización y la actitud hacia el mercado voluntario de carbono y la necesidad de identificar la necesidad de las comunidades.
So we're also having online dialogues to assess the awareness and attitudes towards VCM, to test the community needs, what their identified needs are for engagement.
Desarrollar una herramienta de autodiagnóstico para ayudar a las comunidades a evaluar sus capacidades y determinar qué apoyo, qué herramientas adicionales le hace falta.
And we're also developing a self-diagnostic tool to help communities assess their needs and determine what other additional supports or tools that they deem are necessary.
Un proyecto de investigación sobre los repartos de los beneficios, teniendo en cuenta la rendición de cuentas y la distribución equitativa de los ingresos del carbono.
And we also have a research project that's focused on the benefit sharing that also includes accountability and equitable distribution.
¿Cuáles son nuestros próximos pasos?
So what are
Foro.
our next steps of the forum?
Uno, realizar la consulta sobre proyectos de estrategia con organizaciones que representan a los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales.
So we want to carry out more consultations for our strategy with organizations that represent Indigenous people as well as local communities.
Realizar un evento en la COP30 donde vamos a plantear las estrategias para recibir insumos y también validar nuestra estrategia.
So we're also going to have an event at COP30 to present our draft strategy where we're going to receive inputs from the audience, from other Indigenous peoples, and we're going to be able to include that within our strategy.
Formar asociaciones estratégicas, como esta mañana vimos la presentación, vimos que enmarca en la línea que trabajamos y yo creo que tenemos que buscar esas estrategias de alianza que nos permita impulsar el trabajo del foro, tanto gubernamentales y de instituciones, ONG u otra iniciativa de inversores.
And we also want to have other strategic meetings like the one we had this morning, where we want to create other alliances with governments, NGOs, other institutions, and other initiatives so that we can work and collaborate together to move this forward.
De igual manera, tener esa alianza con otras partes interesadas, ya sea ONGs, instituciones de investigaciones. O sea, la idea es tener una alianza fuerte donde pueda contribuir al trabajo del foro.
So yeah, we want to continue working and collaborating with other people to get other stakeholders interested, work with NGOs, research institutes to create a strong alliance to push our work forward.
Y un ejemplo que tenemos como pueblos indígenas, el trabajo que se ha realizado actualmente con Altri y EDF, que es el Fondo de Defensa Ambiental de los Estados Unidos, en actualizar los estándares de AR, específicamente el componente, los beneficios sociales culturales.
So we also want to work with other projects, and a couple of projects I want to highlight that we are working with is Altri, and with the US, there's an environmental defense fund that we're working with. And the idea of these initiatives is to highlight the social and cultural aspects as well, to integrate this within our work.
Tenemos que tener esa sinergia con estas iniciativas positivas que tienen la misma visión del foro, de fortalecer los derechos y asegurar de que los beneficios realmente lleguen a los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Muchas gracias.
So we want to create these synergies. We want to create synergies with other institutions who have the same visions as us so that we can strengthen our rights and make sure that the benefits are really shared among Indigenous people and local communities. Thank you.
So we have heard about the work that the forum is doing, and thank you very much, Onel, for that beautiful presentation. I would like to invite anyone that has questions for the forum to, please raise their hand. Thanks.
Just to introduce myself, I'm Rupert Quinlan, Associate Director at the Integrity Council. Stella, Onel, Mamta, who's in the room, and 5 other people are my bosses. So they tell me what to do, and I generally do what they say. So we're going to open up to questions. Onel will leap into action with his microphone when he's required. We have lots of colleagues online. So if you do ask a question, please speak slowly so our translators can do the best in terms of representing the points that you raise. And I will probably take 2 questions at a time. And we have a question over here. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Onel. That's really amazing. So I have a question regarding the self-strengthening. Is it also included about how to encourage these indigenous people to be true, honest, genuine whistleblower? So then they, is it also included like how to improve the whistleblowing system among them? So yeah, I think that's my question.
Stella, are you motivated to take this question? If you are, I'm going to give you a microphone.
So on the grievance mechanism, I think that we'll call the grievance mechanism. So the forum is currently developing a curriculum where they can advise, which will be shared, and then they can advise. This will be a step-by-step way, procedural way of how to address grievances and how to actually form grievance mechanisms in these communities that are culturally, making sure that the grievance mechanisms are culturally appropriate and making sure that they are inclusive and they're designed by the indigenous people. So it's basically ensuring that when project developers, for instance, want to create grievance mechanism for their projects, they have to include indigenous peoples on the table so that they can see which one, how to design this grievance mechanisms with them in mind, obviously.
Thank you, Stella. Peter, yes, please. Paul, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentations. I'm from IID, and we've been working with something called the Community Advisory Panel, which has been looking at Indigenous peoples and local communities integration and views on biocredits, which is also an innovative financing solution. It's now morphed into an independent panel, which is called the International Environmental Guardians, IEG. And I was just curious, are you aware of this organization? And if not, maybe, I'm not a member, we no longer are involved in them, but you could approach them directly and maybe learn lessons and share experience with biocredits and carbon credits, given that you have some of the same challenges and opportunities in both markets. Thank you.
Stella, I might jump in just at the beginning before I hand over to maybe Onel for a diversity of views, but we thank you for the question. Yes, we are aware of them as a secretariat, not as the forum. And Onel and DL, the co-chairs of the forum, met with some representatives of that panel at COP16, the Biodiversity COP in Cali, Colombia, in, I'm going to say, November last year. Onel, I might hand the question to you. If you need clarification, please say so.
Sí, yo creo que estas iniciativas que hay, como le indiqué, que es necesario unir esos esfuerzos. Yo sé que hay varias iniciativas y uno de los preocupaciones que tengo personalmente, cómo poder tener sinergia de toda esta iniciativa. Esta mañana me preguntaban de acceso de financiamiento y yo le decía, el acceso de financiamiento está creando especie de crear un grupo por acá, otro grupo por aquí, pero de acuerdo a los prioridades de los mismos donantes, prioridades en qué área tiene que trabajar. Y esto también es un riesgo, porque automiza todos esos recursos, porque solamente pareciera que se da a un sector, no a todos los sectores de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Por tanto, yo creo que iniciativa como esta debe tener un vínculo. El foro está abierto para tener ese vínculo porque la experiencia, la información que nos pueden dar insumos fortalece el trabajo del foro.
Yes, I think we need to unite these initiatives. It's very important. I know that lots of different initiatives exist. And one of my main concerns is how do we establish synergies with these things? This morning, I was at a meeting where I was asked about access to different finance, microfinance, etc. And they were all saying how we're going to create groups here and there, and they were talking about the different priorities of it. And I sat there and I thought, this is all a huge risk because it seems that we're all trying to help different sectors, but we are one sector, the Indigenous peoples and local communities. And we need to be able to find a way to link all of these things, and our inputs are our experience.
I hope that answers your question. Thank you. I've got a nod. I'm going to charge a colleague to take a question online.
So we've got a question online from Carol. Will the forum develop a set of minimum requirements or best practices for benefit sharing? If so, when do you estimate these would be finalized?
So yes, the forum is currently working on that. Those are the priority areas. It's one of the priority areas that the forum is working on, really trying to make sure that there are best practices for engaging communities, even in the aspect of benefit sharing. And these are among the priority areas that you saw earlier. So we'll be launching that during COP30 and making sure that we also get, it will be a consultative, platform to make sure that we also get inputs from other people that are not necessarily present within the forum to make sure that we get diverse views on it. Thanks.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Michaela Weiss from Art Trees. Thanks so much for the presentation and all the great work. My question is how the work of the forum will link with the broader activities with ICVCM and if it will impact the core carbon principles and what the plan is for that. Thanks.
Okay, apparently I'm picking this one. So the forum is in a strong position. It's incubated for the moment by the Integrity Council. However, the vision is for it to achieve true independence. So in terms of having a legal personality, doing its own fundraising, and being truly standalone, that's probably 2, 3, 4 years away. And I suspect the strategy will touch on that. Nell mentioned earlier that the strategy was finalized. The forum is in a strong position because it has a direct link to ICVCM, to the Integrity Council. The Integrity Council has Indigenous members on its board, 3 members, permanent seats on its board, who work very closely with the forum. So the forum has a direct link at board level, whereby its deliberations, recommendations, policy insights are fed directly into that governance structure within ICVCM. The forum also works at the workstream level, so into the continuous improvement work programs, into the assessments. I won't go too far down that road, but what I would do is encourage you to speak to some of my colleagues in the room who are going to wave right now. So at the back, we have Richard Iliff, Director of the Assessments Team. To my northeast, I have Lorna Ritchie, who works in our Public Affairs team. So deeper dives into ICVCM, I would encourage you to talk to those colleagues. Anel, as co-chair, do you want to add on the link to the work of ICVCM?
Yo creo que una de las cosas que personalmente me motivó a trabajar en el foro fue de algo que no sucede muy frecuentemente. Es decir, trabajar con una instancia, pero que esta instancia nos dé la autonomía. la independencia en nuestra toma de decisiones. Porque muchas veces hay una instancia superior que condiciona el trabajo de lo que está abajo, ¿no? Pero nosotros tenemos un vínculo directo con nuestros representantes indígenas en el Consejo de ICBSM, ¿ya? Pero da la particularidad que nuestras acciones son independientes. O sea, tenemos apoyo, pero también tenemos muy claro nuestra posición, ¿ya? Yo creo que esto es algo innovador, algo nuevo, porque muchas veces repito que cuando se crea o se apoya esta iniciativa, solo depende de arriba, ya sea financieramente o su tiempo y acciones. Pero en este no, el foro tiene la libertad de buscar, como dijo Roper, de buscar nuestro propio financiamiento, ¿ya? Tenemos la libertad de presentar y ya tuvimos un éxito el año pasado en Nueva York, tenemos un apoyo, aunque no es mucho, pero ya es el inicio. Entonces yo creo que esa es la particularidad del foro que tiene y que yo insisto, para mí, y tampoco el Consejo nos dice con quién tenemos que aliar, sino va a depender de los intereses, de las necesidades del foro, ¿ya? Por lo tanto, está abierto esa alianza que podemos tener o esa colaboración, tanto instituciones como personas o hasta con inversores. O sea que acá el foro no tiene miedo con quién trabajar, porque estamos bien claros qué perseguimos, cuál es nuestro objetivo y los resultados que esperamos, que finalmente es para beneficiar y fortalecer los derechos de nuestros pueblos, que son los que tienen los bosques.
So one of the things that's really motivating, I can't remember who asked the question, sorry, and which doesn't happen very often, is the way that we work. So we are, often the case is that you have a body and there's no autonomy, there's no independence. Often there's a superior body on top that gives the instructions, but what we have is a direct link, and we have this also through the three Indigenous members who are on the board. And our actions are independent. However, we do receive support as well. And this is something that's quite new. This is something rather innovative. Often what you see is a top-down approach, and this can be for many different things like finance. However, we have a very different approach to this. We have a lot of freedom with regards to what we present, how we find funds. For example, in New York last year, we did receive support, and I think this is something that makes us really stand out. In addition, the board doesn't tell us who we can work with, who we can collaborate with. So our alliances and our collaborations are very much open, whether these are collaborations with people, with institutions, with different fora. And the board are not scared of who we're going to work with because they're very much aligned with our goal and our vision, which at the end of the day is to protect forests.
Thank you. We've got 3 questions in the room, 3, 4. We've also got some questions online, but I know that there are people in the room being very patient, particularly you, madam, at the back. So yes, please.
Thank you. So I'm representing a community of operators and developers around the world called the Art of Forests. We've been operating as a startup until now, which has been funded earlier this year. So I just wanted to offer the community as a resource. This is an amazing program. We have been working on knowledge sharing together, and community benefit sharing has certainly been part of the discussions that we've looked at. We have a number of members who represent Indigenous peoples directly, I would say. We obviously have different stages of representation within membership, as the market is structured at the moment. So just to say that we're here now and would love to support this in any way we can.
Thank you. I think there's a conversation to be had in 10 or 20 minutes. Let's take 2 more questions in the room for people being patient, and then we'll go online.
I've been patient. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Sultana Bashir. I'm from the UK government's International Forest Unit. I sit in a team that works on REDD+, forest carbon, and voluntary and wider carbon markets as well. We work closely on all these issues. Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. Really delighted to hear about this work by ICVCM. Had been planning to get in touch to find out more about the work you're doing with IPs and LCs. We are actually looking more closely at some of these priority areas that you've mentioned today, in particularly grievance mechanisms, benefit sharing, this whole how do we move IPs and LCs from being viewed as passive beneficiaries to actual actors with a voice and in decision-making, a seat at the table. You've mentioned various timelines for products. It would be great if it's possible to engage before COP to find out more. And also, you alluded to the fragment, the multiple initiatives, relevant initiatives that are taking place with some important decisions also being made in parallel about them. And my concern would be if you wait till COP to launch your benefit sharing best practice or your strategy, you may miss the opportunity to feed into these other things that are also being announced at COP and being worked through right now. So it would be really great to join up earlier. Thank you very much.
Should we just take your question now as well, just to save some time, please?
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. Super interesting. There's one thing that I wanted to ask you is you mentioned about autonomy and doing your own fundraising, I feel at some point. Is there a potential where you see yourself like sub-granting directly to Indigenous people, local communities, and Afro-descendant, because we know that this is a barrier on the very early stage, and that depends on grants and donor that most of the time don't actually give this money directly to this group. So is that something, a role that you think about taking in the future? I had another question that I can't remember. So let's just go with that.
Okay, I'm not going to answer that second question to demonstrate the autonomy and independence of the forum. So, Anel, there's two questions. One is act now with your insights, your recommendations, partner up now, don't wait for COP, could be too late. And the second question is, in your mind, and in your fellow forum members' minds, Bamtra, I'm looking at you too, do you see provision of financial support to Indigenous organizations as an aim and objective?
Sí, buenas preguntas. La primera, de por qué hacer el foro. Nosotros hemos estado dialogando con otras iniciativas de pueblos indígenas, tratando para buscar insumos y tenga validación el trabajo de nosotros. Justamente algunos han planteado por qué no hacer un evento antes de la COP, y ya en la COP de llevar resultados con insumos que hayamos tenido, ya el trabajo de nosotros. Pero la gran limitación no son los presupuestos, porque sabemos que traer representantes a nivel global recae muchos recursos, había que hacer esfuerzos. Por eso que yo siempre hablo de la alianza. Si hay oportunidad de que otras iniciativas relacionadas a los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales tienen la facilidad de aportar, claro, podemos hacer, sería lo ideal, ¿ya? Pero ahora, como tenemos fondos limitados, pensamos que en la COP van a estar llegando representantes, quizás no mucho, porque ahora con Brasil es un lío, ¿ya? Porque los hospedajes, los precios están altísimos, pero yo sé que van a llegar algunos representantes indígenas y aprovechar. Pero lo ideal sería, comparto, realizar antes, porque se concentraría más en el trabajo de las prioridades que hemos escogido. ¿ya? Porque ya en la COP hay muchas cosas, muchos eventos, reuniones bilaterales, uno va corriendo y es como aquí, que ya estoy desubicado. En este sentido, pero yo creo que podemos hacer esfuerzos, Rupert, de identificar si hay organizaciones que pueden aportar y podamos realizar este evento. En segundo lugar, yo soy de las personas que sueño mucho. Estoy más cuando estoy fuera de mi territorio, porque en mi territorio tengo otro tipo de trabajo y cuando en este caso sueño en tener, no siempre hablo de no solamente hacer programas, hacer tareas o acciones o programar acciones y siempre llamo, hay que aterrizar. ¿Dónde aterrizar? A las comunidades. Porque es bonito tener un programa, una estrategia, pero que no, si no se implementa en las comunidades, no hay tanto el impacto que queremos. ¿Ya? Eso significa para mí personalmente que el foro inicialmente ahora estamos preparando el terreno, las herramientas, las estrategias, creo que va a ser el segundo paso, ya buscar financiamiento, va a aplicar esa estrategia, va a aplicar esos programas, esas acciones que estamos programando. ¿Ya? Esta es para mí personalmente como copresidente del foro, esa es la idea que tengo, ¿ya? Pero en estos momentos no puedo hacer las dos cosas. Primero que tengo que tener la base bien consolidada, la estrategia consultada, validado por los pueblos indígenas, entonces dar el paso siguiente de implementar esas acciones en las comunidades, en la base. Ahí se va a requerir esfuerzos de todos los aliados, de aportar granito de arena. Es como en la mañana dije, en mi idioma, unámonos para conservar los bosques, que en mi idioma sería Anmaratoge, Sapi, Sabuega. Entonces, esto es lo que queremos. Pero no puedo decir solamente aquí, pero para eso tengo que tener acción en las comunidades. Gracias.
Very good questions, thank you. So to answer the first one, we've been talking with different organizations from different Indigenous peoples and local community organizations to get different insights. And we also asked ourselves the same questions. Why do we not do another pre-COP event? Well, we would like to do one, however, we're limited by funds is one of the things, but there are other things. We know that it's very costly to bring everyone from around the world because participants come from the four corners of the world. And I know that I always talk about making alliances. And if we can meet up with others, then that's ideal, but there are limits, as I said. And at COP, it's also difficult because there are going to be lots of participants there, or perhaps not so many because of the accommodation situation and because prices are sky high. So yes, it would be ideal to meet up before. And the other thing with COP is that once you get there, there are so many events, so many bilateral meetings and side events, and you're running around left, right, and center, and you can never quite find where you're meant to be. So a pre-COP event would be ideal. To answer the second question, I'm very much a dreamer. So I dream a lot, especially when I travel, because the reality here is very different to the work that I do back home. And I dream of programs, I dream of actions, but mostly I dream of all of these things going directly to Indigenous peoples and local communities on the ground. If not, then there can be no impact. So with the forum, we're preparing strategies and then we look for funding. And at least that's how I see it personally as co-chair. First, you have to build the base, you have to build a foundation. And then you have to do the consultations, which have to be validated by the Indigenous peoples and local communities. And then you have the action, which has to reach them on the ground. And as I was saying this morning, and I said it in my language, our aim is to unite to save the planets. And that's what we're here to do. That's what we want, but we can't just say it. It has to be translated into action.
Yeah, and again, when I was finishing my introduction conversation, I said that the forum cannot do this alone. It needs to work with individuals like yourselves in the room and those online as well. So if you see that it is important for the forum to have engagements before COP, even if we have mentioned, the co-chair has mentioned that funding can be a problem in organizing events like this. If you think webinars are something that we can have and you can join in, we can still do that. We want to help co-create this space together and make sure that we reach as many indigenous peoples and local communities as we possibly can. So if you think webinars is a way, no one? So no one? Okay, good. So we'll see what we can do about that. Thank you very much for that lovely comment. Thanks.
Thanks, Stella. Have we got, I just want to check that if we have, yes, I'm recognizing you. Do we have questions online? Okay, we'll stay in the room. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the presentation. Two quick questions. One, are you intending to work with the supervisory body of the Paris Agreement crediting mechanism? Because I know there's also a ongoing conversation about grievance mechanisms and more meaningful involvement of indigenous peoples and local communities. So again, in the spirit of connecting the dots, I was wondering if you had any initial thoughts or kind of plans. And then secondly, I represent the Climate Action Data Trust. We're a not-for-profit database that's aiming to provide better access to information around credits issued around the world. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts around kind of what kind of information is missing or like is lacking, and kind of what would empower communities to feel more in charge of their futures when it comes to carbon credits and kind of development. I know it's a broad question, so we probably have a whole conversation about it, but if there's kind of any obvious things that come to mind, would be interested.
I'd love to offer my own professional and personal insights, which is transparency is key, and that's something that is lacking, sadly, at the moment in terms of benefit sharing or revenue distribution. The second is my own observations in the last 25 years is that data sovereignty is essential. It's another property right that is sadly missing, along with land rights, carbon rights. So data sovereignty is also something that's sadly missing, and it is a grey area that needs clearing up. And I think extractive practices are still operating in this market that needs fixing. I'll probably stop myself there before I get myself into trouble. And Stella, you look desperate to speak.
Yeah, so especially this conversation around benefit sharing. So interestingly, during this week, I was in one of the meetings, and there was a project that was presenting their beautiful work, beautiful numbers, and I got curious and I raised my hand and I asked about their benefit sharing mechanism with the communities. And what the I'd say project developer said is that this is not a non-profit. So it's really conversations like this that we need to have, and that is exactly why we need to have a forum like this, because they're operating in indigenous peoples and local communities' lands, right? So how is it really, how do you give a comment like that? You're coming from a different country, operating in territories of indigenous communities, and saying you're not giving them benefits in terms of financial benefits, another benefit because it's not a nonprofit. It's a business. It's like going to a shop. When you go to the shop, you don't expect, you're giving money to the shopkeeper, right? And they're giving you something in return. So it is transactional. It should be like that. And you don't tell the shop owner, it's not a nonprofit, So this is exactly why we need to have conversations like this to try and shape this market in a way that indigenous people can actually, engage in this conversation on equal footing. Yeah.
There was a very technical dimension to your question at the beginning. Can I suggest that we pick that up bilaterally following this, because that's quite technical?
Okay, so we've got a question online. As someone working in water and sustainable development at a subnational level, and particularly Taita Taveta region of Kenya. I've seen how local and indigenous communities often lack the technical and financial capacity to participate meaningfully in complex mechanisms like the voluntary carbon markets. How does the forum plan to bridge this capacity gap, particularly in ensuring that communities' priorities and traditional knowledge are not only respected, but translated into viable, high-integrity carbon projects that deliver direct, sustained benefits at a grassroots level?
Thank you for the question. I'm just waiting for the translation to Anel. Anel, are you happy to pick this up?
Sí, precisamente una de las barreras que hay de comunicación del idioma, donde la información no le llega de una manera adecuada a los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Esta es la confusión que hay, porque sabemos que hay sectores que están contra el mercado de carbono, hay sectores que están a favor. Entonces cada uno le da la información a las comunidades desde su perspectiva, desde su interés, ¿ya? Entonces eso crea confusión a los pueblos indígenas. Y además, si hay información, en muchos casos están en inglés, y las comunidades indígenas, muchos no dominan ni el idioma de su país, ¿ya? Ya sea español, inglés, francés u otros idiomas, no lo dominan, hablan su idioma. Entonces esa barrera de comunicación impide que los pueblos indígenas tengan una información real y esto dificulta el trabajo. Entonces, hay una necesidad que los pueblos no... Yo siempre digo, no, a mí no me van a construir capacidad, sino me tienen que fortalecer la capacidad, porque los pueblos indígenas conocen lo que son los bosques, tienen conocimiento sobre bosques, la importancia de los bosques. Entonces yo creo que hay que fortalecer, porque el tema de venta de bonos, el mercado de carbono, cómo calcular, qué vender, es complejo. Hasta muchos que leen no lo entienden o lo interpretan a su manera, ¿ya? Entonces imagínense a un pueblo que le digan que van a vender carbono y no ven el carbono. Para ellos es inconcebible decirle, ¿cómo voy a vender? Y él relaciona que va a vender el árbol. Entonces ya se asustan. Voy a vender mi árbol cuando ese árbol para mí es sagrado, para mí depende de ese árbol. ¿Cómo voy a vender? Para poner un ejemplo. Y si le dicen que se mide con esa ecuación, el cálculo que hacen, cuántas toneladas tiene se libera o tiene de reservorio, de igual manera. Entonces hay una necesidad de trabajo, de fortalecer, de hacer entender, dar la información de vida. ¿Qué significa esto? ¿O significa perder autonomía sobre sus bosques? ¿O qué? Porque si le decimos que es para contribuir al problema de cambio climático, ellos lo saben que contribuyen, por eso tienen los árboles en su tierra, los bosques. Pero si le dicen que van a vender, ¿ya? Porque acuérdense que hay muchos pueblos que en su idea no es comercializar lo que hay en la naturaleza. Por ejemplo, en mi tierra no se trabaja minería. Inconcebible si alguien le habla de minería porque no se trabaja, hay algo sagrado para mi pueblo, ¿ya? Entonces, y muchos en mi pueblo igual no hay aserrería, o sea, no se tumba árboles para sacar madera, solo se saca lo que se necesita, pero para vender es inconcebible, ¿ya? O sea, no me permiten vender madera, no puedo crear una empresa de madera, ¿ya? O sea, son algunos ejemplos para que vean cuál es una realidad diferente a lo que están fuera de las comunidades. Una realidad diferente desde el punto de vista de inversor, ¿ya? Porque el inversor quiere invertir y ganar. Y en la mentalidad indígena, en muchos casos, no está pensando en ganar, en acumular riqueza, sino tener lo justo para vivir, que cubra sus necesidades. Entonces, este se trabó, yo creo que es la barrera del idioma, la barrera de la información real. sin tener, este es el objetivo del foro, llevar esa información lo más adecuado posible, porque muchas veces también llevamos informaciones con lenguaje todo que no entiende nadie, ¿ya? Solamente el especialista, ¿ya? O le llevamos con gráfica, una gráfica de campana de Gauss. Para un indígena, ¿qué significa esa campana de Gauss? ¿Ya? Pero para un científico sí significa algo. ¿Qué significa? ¿Ya? ¿Ya? O las gráficas. Entonces, creo que estos son elementos que necesitamos buscar, ser más sencillo posible la información, no informaciones tan técnicas o lenguaje elevados. Gracias.
Yes, one of the main barriers that we have is actually language. Sometimes information doesn't reach people in the language of these indigenous peoples or local communities. And there are all sorts of sectors of voluntary carbon market. And there are some people who are in favor. And so they will go and talk to indigenous peoples and local communities with this bias in mind so that they can convince them. So that it's a dual problem. And of course, the information that does reach us is often in English. And you have to understand that these are contexts in which indigenous peoples don't even, they're not speaking the colonial language, English, French, or Spanish of the country that they're in. So this is also another barrier and stops us getting information. And I've always said, you're not building my capacity. You can strengthen my capacity, but you're not building my capacity. I'm the one with the forests. We're the ones with the forests. And people always talk about the carbon market, and it's very hard to understand all of these things about buying and selling credits, and people also interpret things in their own way. And then people come up to me and talk about selling trees, and I'm very confused because trees for us are sacred. I don't want to sell any of my trees. I depend on my trees. I have a spiritual connection to my trees. But people always come around with all of these calculations and maths and equations and how many tons of this and how many tons of that, and it just doesn't mean anything to us. Does this mean losing autonomy? Are we losing the autonomy of our forests? Is this the whole fighting climate change thing, which is something that we already know? Indigenous peoples already know that we're fighting climate change through having our forests healthy. We're not into the game of commodifying nature. In my land, we're not in any extractivist industries or mining or anything like that, because the nature around us and everything around us is sacred. We only use what we need. Selling is not an option. And I'm not interested in starting a tree felling business. I know that investors come and they want to make a profit and invest in this and that, but indigenous peoples and local communities don't have this mindset of blind accumulation. We just think, what do I need to survive? And I think that's one of the aims of this forum, is how do we deliver information accurately in a language that people understand, not just in a language that makes sense to experts and scientists. And sometimes that language might be images, it might not be words. And so these are one of the top priorities, is to simplify and make things understandable to people. Thank you.
Thank you, Anel. I recognize you, sir. We are near time, but to honor the many people online, we've got one more question online. And if you can make your question, sir, in the room really quick. I can't guarantee it'll be a quick answer. Let's go online, please.
With the current changes in funding models across the globe, what's your intended funding model, initiatives and target areas for IPs and LCs?
That's a big question, and something we're struggling with, right? Not struggling with, but we have a big fundraising challenge in front of us right now. That's as well as getting the strategy public consulted on. Our big challenge in front of us is resourcing this forum so that we can consider regranting, for instance, that question that came earlier. Stella, are you burning with an answer here? No is a perfectly adequate answer. So It's a good question. I might park it, and I don't mean to be disrespectful in doing that, but I might park it for the conversation in there, which is no good for that person online. What do we see? It was suggested earlier, actually I will pick this up, it was suggested earlier that too little of philanthropic money is making it directly to Indigenous groups because of the perceived risk, because it's high transactional costs. The due diligence is really difficult because you're dealing with organizations that don't have boards, that don't necessarily have accounts, yet the work that they do on the ground is absolutely stellar. Sorry, Stella, but it is. So we have to, in terms of presenting a compelling fundraising proposition, is we have to communicate the unique position that the forum is in. And I go right to the beginning of our session in that the forum has a direct link to the market. It is independent, self-leading. It will become legally and financially independent in the short term, in the near term. So I think it's in a unique position. So it's communicating that compellingly to the right funders. That's the answer I think we have to go with right now. I think very quickly, one last question in the room, please.
Stand over here. Hi, everybody. My name is Sam Lampert. I work with ERS. We're the standard that's most recently received ICPCM approval. We also recently acquired Equitable Earth. Equitable Earth is a new standard around forest conservation that looks through how that was designed in partnerships with representatives, IPLCs, alongside with established project developers and independent experts. We are constantly looking at ways at how we can improve both every element of what we do. And so maybe as a final question, I'd be curious to hear from the panel, kind of what would be the one thing that all ICPCM approved standards could do that would elevate the quality of projects and ensure more equitable sharing with people who control and manage the land?
Thank you for that question. That's definitely a forum question. Anel, the last word is with you in this response. Good luck.
No, en primer lugar, antes de contestar, quería también compartir que hay iniciativas que han sido exitosos. La experiencia que tenemos personalmente en el Foro Cooperativo de Carbono, que el financiamiento fue directo a los pueblos indígenas y los pueblos indígenas priorizaron sus acciones, ya tanto comunidades locales y pueblos indígenas, sin intermediario. Eso logramos gracias por las gestiones, o sea que no había ONG grandes o bancos para administrar recursos, sino fueron directos a las organizaciones regionales de Asia, de África y de Latinoamérica. Esta es una experiencia, o sea que eso fue algo innovador y nos costó romper esa práctica del Banco Mundial, porque eso era los fondos que administraban los fondos del Banco Mundial, y siempre pongo eso para que se vea que es posible ya tener ese acceso directo. Y segundo, que también hay que dedicar un porcentaje, por lo menos un fondo, para ir fortaleciendo esas capacidades más de administración, ya se habla de más de administración. Bien, lo otro lado yo creo que me parece excelente, me gustaría tener acceso al trabajo de esto. Yo creo que iniciativa como esta fortalece defender los derechos de los pueblos indígenas, ¿ya? Iniciativa de desarrollo estándar, ¿ya? Y esa es la labor que tenemos el foro. Si, como yo le repetí, si tenemos estas alianzas con diversas iniciativas, vamos a ir fortaleciendo. La idea es esto. Lo que no quisiera yo personalmente es que cada iniciativa fuera una parcela. Uno maneja su estándar, otro maneja su estándar. Al final va a ser un caos manejando estándares, ¿ya? Y uno no va a saber qué estándar voy a usar, ¿ya? Entonces, mejor entonces tener esas sinergias con la estándar. Si yo personalmente pienso como copresidente, si hay trabajo avanzado y coincide con nuestro objetivo, coincide con nuestra visión del foro, no es necesario duplicar esfuerzos, sino tomar esa iniciativa, ese estándar o esa acción y luego dedicar tiempo a otras acciones, otros componentes que es necesario. Porque sabemos que, ya le digo, es complejo. El mundo del mercado voluntario es complejo. ¿Ya? Y necesita esos actores, unir esfuerzos, estas iniciativas ¿ya? Diferentes. Así que yo creo que como el foro está abierto para recibir insumos, para recibir aportes de diferentes iniciativas que hay a nivel global en relación a los derechos de los pueblos indígenas, en relación al bosques, en relación a la biodiversidad, en relación al mercado voluntario de carbono. Gracias.
Actually, there have been initiatives that have been successful in the carbon market with regards to direct funding that goes directly to Indigenous peoples and local communities without any intermediaries. This happened without any NGOs or any big banks or anything like that. And the funds were able to reach people on the ground in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So this was very innovative, and I always use this as an example to show that it is possible to have direct funding. It's also important to then dedicate a small percentage of funds to admin so that we can carry this on and contribute to the longevity of direct funding. As I mentioned before, the forum has alliances, and the more alliances we have, the stronger we can be. And we don't want one to deal with one standards and another to use another standards, etc., because otherwise it would lead to chaos. If we can all align and if we are aligned, then we don't need to do double the amount of work, and we can take this standard or take that action and take whatever has worked in the past and then dedicate time elsewhere. Because as I mentioned, the voluntary carbon market is very complex. So since the forum is open to any global insights and support with action that can directly go to Indigenous peoples and local communities and help forests, then we're all ears. Thank you.
So thank you very much for those lovely conversations and for joining into this conversation. So for those that are in the room, we'd like to thank you very much for taking your time and joining in this conversation. And those that are also online, thank you very much for taking your time to join us today. And thank you for the beautiful questions that you've asked. Let's definitely continue having this conversation. Again, we cannot do this work as a forum alone. We need every support that we can get to make sure that the rights of and interests of Indigenous peoples and local communities are protected. So yeah, so we're going to call it a day. So if you have more questions, please make sure that you reach out to Mamta over there. Mamta, just say hi to the room. So she's also a forum member from Asia, representing Asia. So please reach out to her for more questions. If you have questions, reach out to Onel, myself, and if you have any questions on ICVCM, you are told the people to reach out to. So yeah, thank you very much.